Snow fell over Manhattan the night Evelyn Hart left the hospital and discovered that her husband had already erased her from their family. She stood inside the lobby of the West End residences with a hospital bracelet still fastened around her wrist. Recent thyroid surgery had left her weak, exhausted, and barely able to speak. She had spent weeks fighting to breathe and survive, but nothing prepared her for the sight of Cole Whitford waiting beneath the chandelier with divorce papers in his hands. Behind him stood Harper Dale, his 25-year-old assistant, wearing bright red lipstick and the satisfied expression of someone who believed she had already won. "You have 10 minutes to leave," Cole said, throwing an eviction notice toward Evelyn. "The court agreed that you're unfit to keep the boys. They're coming with me." Evelyn tried to answer, but only a painful rasp escaped her throat. The elevator doors opened, and their 14-year-old twins, Aiden and Caleb, rushed into the lobby. Before they could reach their mother, a security guard stepped between them. "Dad, stop!" Caleb shouted. "Mom just got out of surgery." Cole showed no emotion. Weakness has consequences. Aiden tried to push past the guard, screaming that he would never abandon his mother. Harper leaned close to Cole and whispered something that made him smile. Then a tenant raised a phone and began recording. Cole believed the video would capture Evelyn's humiliation. Instead, it would preserve every cruel word, every threat, and every attempt to tear two terrified boys away from their sick mother and become the first piece of evidence that would bring his carefully controlled life crashing down. Within seconds, phones turned, whispers spread, and Evelyn Hart, the woman who once balanced corporate books with perfect precision, stood trembling in the center of her own eviction. Outside, the wind roared. The city that never sleeps felt cold enough to swallow her whole. Aiden grabbed her hand. "Mom, say something, please." But Evelyn couldn't. Her voice was gone, stolen by illness, crushed by betrayal, and Cole stepped back with one final blow that cut deeper than any knife. "This building is mine," he said. "And you're nothing now." The sliding glass doors of the West End residences parted with a cruel hiss, letting in a blast of winter wind that cut through Evelyn Hart's thin hospital sweater. Aiden and Caleb tried to shield her, each boy taking one of her arms as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Snow had begun to fall harder now, the kind that sticks to hair and eyelashes, the kind that feels like tiny pins against exposed skin. Evelyn's breath trembled out in uneven clouds. She could barely stand, much less fight the eviction unfolding around her. Behind them, Cole Whitford barked orders at the building staff as if he were conducting a business meeting, not destroying his own family. "Clear her things. Everything. I want that apartment empty tonight," he commanded. To him, this wasn't tragedy. It was a transaction. Harper followed close behind, clutching her designer coat and smiling with an expression that was halfway between pity and triumph. She leaned toward Cole, pretending to whisper privately, but her voice carried just enough for the boys to hear. "She looks worse than I expected. Honestly, this is for the best." Caleb spun around, fury exploding in his chest. "Shut up. You don't know anything about her." Harper's smirk didn't fade. "Language, sweetheart." Aiden stepped in front of his brother, jaw clenched. He turned to Cole, desperation raw in his eyes. "Dad, please. She just got out of the hospital. She can't even talk yet. You're really going to do this now?" Cole didn't meet his son's gaze. "This is reality. She's been nothing but a burden, and I won't let her drag you boys down with her." Evelyn tried to speak, tried so hard, but only a strained breath escaped. Her throat felt tight, swollen, powerless. She reached for Cole's sleeve, hoping even a silent plea might reach him. He stepped back as if she were toxic. The building's doorman, an older man named Frank, who had known Evelyn for years, approached with 2 suitcases, hers, packed hastily by staff under Cole's direction. He set them down beside her, his face heavy with embarrassment and anger. "Miss Hart, I'm so sorry. I had no choice." Evelyn looked at him with wet eyes, trying to show gratitude where words couldn't exist. Frank lowered his voice. "I saw what he did. Everyone did." As if on cue, a small group of residents gathered near the entrance. Some watched with sympathy, others lifted their phones, recording the scene for reasons Evelyn couldn't understand. Curiosity? Pity? Or just the city's hunger for drama? One woman whispered loudly, "Isn't that Cole Whitford's wife?" "I thought she was still recovering from surgery." Another replied, "He kicked her out? God, that's brutal." The boys noticed the cameras and instinctively pushed closer to their mother, trying to shield her from the world. But there was no shielding tonight, no safety, no dignity left. A taxi rolled past, splashing slush onto the curb. The city noises, horns, night traffic, distant sirens felt louder than usual, as if the whole world had turned its back on her. Aiden grabbed her hand. "Mom, we'll figure this out. We'll take you anywhere you want. Just tell us, okay? Just try." But Evelyn's throat refused to cooperate. The surgery had left her voice fragile, unpredictable. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Panic rose in her eyes. Caleb hugged her tightly. "It's okay. You don't have to talk. We're here." Behind them, Cole shouted one final order. "Remove their access from the building system. All three of them." The doors locked with a soft mechanical click, closing them out of the life that used to be theirs. Snow kept falling, and Manhattan, in all its glittering beauty, didn't stop long enough to notice a mother and her son spiraling into the cold. The snow had thickened into a curtain of white by the time the three of them reached the corner of the block. Evelyn's breaths came in shallow, uneven pulses. Every few steps, her knees wobbled, and Aiden tightened his grip, silently praying she wouldn't collapse again. Caleb kept glancing behind them, half expecting Cole to chase after them, or worse, pretend none of this ever happened. A yellow cab slowed, the driver rolling down his window. "Miss, you need a hospital?" he called out. Evelyn tried to answer, but the only sound she could make was a thin gasp. The boys panicked, waving him off, not wanting to draw more attention. They'd already had enough eyes on them for one night. Cars hissed past on the wet pavement. People moved quickly, heads down, wrapped in scarves and city indifference. For a moment it truly felt like Manhattan had swallowed them whole. And then a sleek black Mercedes-Benz S-Class pulled up to the curb with a smooth purr, its headlights cutting through the snow. The back door opened before they could react. A tall man stepped out. His navy wool coat was dusted with snowflakes, and the collar of a charcoal sweater peeked out beneath it. His shoes were still polished despite the storm, but it was his eyes that struck Aiden first, sharp, steady, and immediately focused on Evelyn. "Evie?" The nickname froze her in place. Aiden and Caleb looked at the stranger, confused. Evelyn's hand trembled as she lifted it slightly, as if reaching toward a memory. He stepped closer, nearly breathless. "It is you." This was Alexander Pierce. To most of Manhattan, he was the founder of Pierce Equity, a quiet billionaire who rarely appeared in photos unless he had to. To Evelyn, he had once been the man she almost married, the man she left behind because life pushed her in another direction toward Cole, toward a future that now lay shattered at her feet. The boys stared at him, unsure whether to trust or defend. Alexander looked at them gently. "Are you her sons?" Caleb stepped forward protectively. "Who are you?" He lowered his voice, respectful. "My name is Alexander Pierce. I knew your mother a long time ago." Evelyn swallowed painfully. Her throat burned as she forced out the softest whisper, barely audible. "Alex." He reached out instinctively, steadying her arm before she could fall. "Evie, what happened? Why are you out here like this?" Aiden's voice cracked. "Our dad kicked us out. She just had surgery. She can't even talk right." Alexander's expression shifted shock, then fury, then something deeper. He turned toward the building they had just been exiled from, his gaze narrowing as if memorizing every detail of it. "He did this?" Caleb nodded, jaw tight. Without another word, Alexander opened the Mercedes door. "Get in, all of you." Evelyn hesitated. Shame flickered in her eyes. She looked down at her hospital bracelet, at her wrinkled clothes, at the snow melting in her hair. She didn't want anyone, especially him, to see her like this. Alexander stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Evie, let me help you, please." The tenderness in his tone cracked something inside her. After a moment, she let Aiden guide her into the warm leather interior. Caleb followed, still on edge. Alexander closed the door gently, circling to the driver's side. He didn't call a chauffeur. He didn't hesitate. He simply slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. As Manhattan blurred past, he glanced at Evelyn in the rearview mirror. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "Whatever he took from you, we'll get it back." For the first time that night, Evelyn closed her eyes, not from pain, but from the faintest spark of hope. The Mercedes glided through the slushy Manhattan streets, its heater filling the cabin with a comforting warmth Evelyn hadn't felt in months. She leaned her head against the window, eyes fluttering shut as exhaustion washed over her. Every breath was heavy, each swallow painful, her throat still raw from surgery. The boys sat on either side of her, their shoulders pressed protectively against hers. Alexander drove with quiet focus, occasionally glancing at her in the mirror. His jaw flexed each time he replayed what he'd witnessed. Evelyn shaking in the snow, Cole's cold stare, the doorman's apology. He had seen mergers collapse, billionaires crumble, and markets crash, but nothing compared to the look in Evelyn's eyes that night, a mix of humiliation, fear, and an almost unbearable loneliness. Aiden spoke first, his voice cracking. "Where are we going?" Alexander kept his voice steady. "Someplace warm. Somewhere she can rest." Caleb frowned. We don't want her to go back to the hospital. They kept poking her with needles." Alexander nodded. "No hospitals, I promise." Minutes later, the Mercedes pulled beneath the covered entryway of the Ritz-Carlton on Central Park South. Bellmen hurried forward, opening doors, offering umbrellas, their professionalism soft but swift. Snow spiraled through the air like tiny shards of glass. Evelyn's eyes widened in panic. She reached for Aiden's sleeve, shaking her head. She didn't belong here, not in her wrinkled clothes, not with the faint scent of antiseptic still clinging to her. She tried to protest, but the sound caught painfully in her throat. Alexander crouched beside her. "Evie, look at me." She hesitated, then met his gaze. "You deserve safety tonight. Nothing more. Nothing less." Tears welled in her eyes. The boys stepped out first, each carrying a worn suitcase. Evelyn followed slowly, leaning on Aiden, while Caleb held a hand beneath her elbow, as if she might break. A concierge hurried over, offering blankets for the boys and a wheelchair for Evelyn. She refused gently, lifting her hand to show she could walk, even if barely. Inside, the lobby glowed with warm, golden light. Crystal fixtures reflected off marble floors, and fresh white orchids filled the air with a clean, soft scent. The contrast between this serenity and the chaos she'd just lived felt surreal, almost dreamlike. As they approached the check-in desk, Alexander placed his hand lightly on her arm. "You're not staying in a standard room," he murmured. "You're staying in a suite, one with 2 bedrooms, so the boys can be right beside you." Evelyn shook her head, panic rising again. She tried to form words. "No, too much, too expensive, I can't accept this." But her voice failed her, as it always did now. Only silence came out. Alexander understood anyway. "Evie, this isn't charity. This is me making up for lost time." Her brows knit in confusion. He took a slow breath. "I should have been there years ago." Before she could react, the receptionist smiled kindly. "Mr. Pierce, the suite you requested is ready." The boys' eyes widened. They had never stepped inside a place like this, much less slept in one. Aiden whispered, "Mom, it's okay. Let him help, just for tonight." Evelyn finally nodded, small, slow, but enough. Upstairs, the suite overlooked Central Park, its snow-covered trees glowing under streetlights. The boys rushed to the window, their excitement momentarily replacing their fear. Evelyn walked toward the bedroom, pausing at the reflection in the mirror. Pale skin, tired eyes, hair tousled by wind and tears. She barely recognized herself. Alexander stood at the doorway. "Rest tonight," he said softly. "Tomorrow, we start putting your life back together." Evelyn didn't know how. She didn't know where to begin, but for the first time in a long time, she felt the faintest spark of possibility. While Evelyn slept for the first real time in weeks, wrapped in the quiet luxury of the Ritz, Cole Whitford was raising a glass of aged scotch in his new penthouse on Madison Avenue. The city lights glittered below, reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the sleek, modern furniture Harper had chosen. She claimed she had an eye for high-end aesthetics, but Cole didn't care either way. As long as it photographed well for social media, it served its purpose. Harper lounged on the velvet sofa, scrolling through her phone. "Your numbers are trending again," she said casually. "Investors love your interview from earlier. They think you're about to land the North Park Tower deal." Cole smirked. "Of course they think that. I practically handed them the vision." But beneath his outward confidence was the lingering residue of something he refused to name. Guilt. He had seen Evelyn's face in the snow. He had seen the boys crying. and for a brief moment, one he immediately buried, he wondered if he had gone too far. Harper noticed his shift and moved closer, pressing her manicured hand to his chest. "You did what you had to do," she purred. "She was dragging you down. You're building an empire, Cole. You don't have time for weakness." He forced a nod. Harper always knew how to stroke his ego. That was part of her appeal. That, and the fact she never questioned his decisions, or so he believed. She poured herself a glass of champagne, taking slow, deliberate sips. Then she asked, casually but too smoothly, "When will the divorce settlement be finalized?" Cole's eyes narrowed. "Why?" She shrugged, pretending to be nonchalant. "Just curious. These things tend to influence your financial standing. For example, if there are any hidden liabilities." Cole stiffened. "There are no hidden liabilities. Don't pry." Harper lifted an eyebrow. "Relax, I'm on your side." But she wasn't. Harper had her own agenda. A secret she kept tucked behind mascara and a perfectly rehearsed smile. She wasn't with Cole because he was powerful. She was with him because she had discovered something in his company's financial archives. Something that could ruin him or make her incredibly rich. She hadn't decided which option she preferred yet. A knock on the penthouse door interrupted the moment. Cole expected it to be room service. But instead, his business partner, Damon Cross, walked in with snow still on his coat. His expression was tense. "We need to talk. Now." Cole set his glass down. "Can it wait? It's late." "No," Damon snapped. "It really can't." Harper slipped into the background, pretending to check her messages, but her ears sharpened. Damon threw a folder onto the table. "There's a hole in our Q4 reports. A big one. And the investors are starting to ask questions." Cole's jaw tightened. "Then lie. Tell them we're restructuring." "This isn't one of your usual shortcuts," Damon said. "If someone digs deep enough, they might find nothing," Cole interrupted sharply, "because there is nothing to find." Damon's stare said he didn't believe that for a second. As tension filled the room, Harper's phone buzzed. She glanced down and smirked. She had received a message from a private investigator she secretly hired. The file was attached. A summary of Cole's past financial dealings with fraudulent shell companies, including one that Evelyn unknowingly had access to years ago. The same evidence Cole thought he destroyed. Harper looked up at him, her smile sweet and poisonous. Cole had no idea that the storm waiting for him wasn't Evelyn. It was the woman sitting in his penthouse. Morning light seeped through the sheer curtains of the Ritz suite, casting a soft glow on the room. Evelyn stirred awake, her breath still raspy, her throat aching with every swallow. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. The white sheets, the quiet luxury, the view of snow-covered Central Park, it all felt like someone else's life. But then she felt a hand on hers. Caleb sat beside the bed, chin resting on his folded arms. "Mom, you're up." His voice cracked with relief. Aiden, sitting on the window ledge, turned quickly. "Alex is here. He brought breakfast. Said it's the soft kind so you can eat without hurting your throat." Evelyn blinked in surprise. She didn't expect him to stay. Alexander stood by the dining table, sleeves rolled up, carefully pouring tea into a porcelain cup. He turned when he noticed her looking. "Hey," he said softly. "I hope you slept." She nodded slowly. He walked over with the tea. "Chamomile and honey. Doctor said it might soothe your throat a little." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful even though her voice still refused to cooperate. Instead, she mouthed "Thank you." "You don't have to talk," he assured. "Just listen. I need to tell you something important." The twins exchanged a quick glance, sensing the change in his tone. Alexander pulled a chair to her bedside. "Evie, I know what Cole did wasn't just cruel. It was strategic. He timed everything to break you when you had no strength left to fight back." He paused before adding, "But he made one mistake. He underestimated your ability to rise again." Evelyn looked down, her eyes filling. "Rise? How could she rise when she could barely speak?" Alexander continued, "I did some digging last night. Cole's finances aren't as clean as he wants the world to think. There are inconsistencies, big ones, and I think he's used your name in the past to hide them." Her head snapped up, shock widening her eyes. "Yes," Alexander said quietly. "I think you're connected to something he thought he buried, but that means you can help bring him down." Aiden clenched his fists. "Good. He deserves it." Caleb nodded fiercely. "Mom didn't do anything wrong." "He did." Alexander reached for Evelyn's hand. "Evie, I'm not asking you to fight him alone. I want you to come work with me, Pierce Equity. Not as a charity case. You're brilliant. You always were. And right now, you need a way back into the world he tried to lock you out of. Evelyn's breath hitched. Work? Like the woman she used to be? She hadn't felt like that version of herself in years. But then fear washed over her. She lowered her gaze, gripping the cup tighter. Her voice wouldn't hold up in meetings. Her energy was unstable. Her confidence had been shattered piece by piece. Alexander seemed to read her thoughts. You don't have to be perfect right away. Just show up. I'll create a flexible role. Remote work at first. Financial analysis. You can ease back in slowly. And when you're ready, we'll take Cole's empire apart brick by brick. Aiden looked hopeful. Mom, you can do it. You taught us how to budget before we even knew algebra. Caleb grinned faintly. Yeah, you're literally smarter than half the people running Wall Street. A small laugh escaped Evelyn, but it came out as a whispery exhale. Alexander smiled. See, you're already improving. She hesitated only a moment longer before giving a small nod. A decision that would change everything. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that in this quiet Ritz suite, a plan was forming, a plan that could tear Cole Whitford's world apart. For the next 2 days, Evelyn barely left the suite. Her voice remained thin and fragile, trapped somewhere between pain and silence. But her mind, long dulled by months of stress, fear, and humiliation, began slowly flickering back to life. Alexander had arranged for a private speech therapist to visit discreetly, and though Evelyn could only manage a handful of soft sounds, the therapist assured her the progress was promising. Still, each attempt to speak reminded her how far she had fallen and how high she would need to climb to regain her old self. The twins tried their best to keep spirits up. Aiden filled the suite with soft music from his phone, gentle piano tracks that didn't strain her senses. Caleb read jokes from an app, purposely choosing terrible ones just to see her smile. In the quiet moments, the boys would whisper to each other about plans, how they would get part-time jobs, how they would take care of her, how they'd never let Cole hurt her again. But Evelyn knew better than anyone. Survival required more than determination. It required strategy. On the third morning, Alexander returned with a laptop tucked under his arm. He placed it gently on the table in front of her. I need to show you something, he said. Evelyn sat slowly, the twins flanking her protectively. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the laptop. Spreadsheet after spreadsheet appeared on the screen. Cole's former business filings, records from Whitford Development, financial statements she recognized from years ago. But among the expected documents were a handful she had never seen, with her own name typed across the bottom. Confusion twisted inside her. Alexander pointed to a highlighted section. These transactions happened during the years you were handling the household accounts. Cole listed you as the approving party, but the signatures, she leaned closer, the signature wasn't hers. Not even close. Her heart thudded painfully. He forged your name, Alexander said quietly, and funneled money through a shell company registered under your social security number. Aiden's breath hissed. He tried to pin something on her. Caleb clenched his jaw. He planned this. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every betrayal settle heavily onto her shoulders. Cole hadn't just hurt her emotionally. He had weaponized her identity. He had set traps years in advance, preparing for the day he'd discard her. When she finally opened her eyes again, they were no longer soft. Something sharper lived there now. Alexander saw it. Evie, if we can prove this, Cole will crumble. Investors will flee. His company will fall apart before he even realizes what's happening. She swallowed hard, pain stretching through her neck, but she nodded. Alexander leaned closer. I want to offer you a temporary role at Pierce Equity. Quiet work behind the scenes. You can analyze financial inconsistencies better than anyone I know. You always had a mind for this. Evelyn hesitated. Her fingers brushed the keyboard. The thought of working again, of using her mind as a weapon rather than a shield, terrified and thrilled her at the same time. The twins waited, watching her with desperate hope. Finally, she typed slowly onto the screen. What do you need me to do? Alexander let out a breath he had been holding. Start here, he said, sliding over a flash drive. Everything Cole didn't want anyone to find. Her pulse quickened. For the first time since her life collapsed, Evelyn Hart wasn't a victim trapped in silence. She was a woman with evidence, a woman with motive, a woman with a plan forming behind her quiet, recovering voice. And Cole had no idea what storm was heading his way. The storm outside had faded into a quiet drizzle by the time Evelyn began her first real day of analysis work. She sat at the dining table of the Ritz suite, wrapped in a soft robe, her laptop open and spreadsheets scattered like a battlefield across the glossy surface. Her throat still ached, her voice barely a whisper when it worked at all, but her mind sharp, calculating and hungry for truth had come alive. Alexander had left early that morning for a board meeting, but not before placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this, Evie. Take it slow. You'll know what to do." She hadn't expected support. She certainly hadn't expected him, but his presence grounded her, gave her strength she didn't know she still possessed. Across the suite, the twins were hunched over their own laptops. Aiden had pulled up tutorials on financial literacy, stock market basics, and real estate structures. Caleb typed furiously, researching shell companies and fraud cases. They looked like two young investigators trying to decode the world that had tried to break their mother. Evelyn watched them silently, pride swelling inside her chest. Caleb noticed her gaze. "We're going to help you, Mom. We're old enough." Aiden added, "Dad thinks we're just kids. He's wrong." She smiled softly, placing a hand over her heart to show how much their words meant. But Evelyn also knew the truth. Helping her meant stepping into a war they weren't ready for. A financial war, a legal war, a psychological war. Still, they were determined. Later that afternoon, a knock sounded at the door. A hotel staff member delivered 3 small packages, each labeled with the Pierce Equity logo. Inside were brand new laptops, noise-canceling headphones, and sleek notebooks embossed with their initials. Aiden's eyes widened. "He did this for us?" Caleb grinned. "Dude, we look like mini CEOs." Evelyn touched the laptops, stunned. Alexander hadn't said a word about this. The gesture wasn't flashy or performative. It was practical, thoughtful, intentional. She typed a quick message on her phone. "You didn't have to do this." Seconds later, he replied, "They're part of your team. Teams need tools." A warmth spread across her cheeks, something she hadn't felt in a long time. After hours of reviewing old financial records, Evelyn finally found something. A small inconsistency buried deep in a 2017 vendor payment. A name she recognized, a company she never authorized, a signature that was clearly forged. Her pulse accelerated. She motioned for the twins. They leaned in as she pointed at the screen. Aiden's jaw dropped. "He used your name for this?" Caleb whispered. "He could go to prison." Evelyn's breath hitched, not because of fear, but because of the clarity forming inside her mind. Every forged document, every fake transaction, every humiliation, it all led back to this single, undeniable truth. Cole Whitford had built his empire on lies, and he had used her as the foundation. The boys exchanged a determined look. They opened their notebooks, writing down everything she pointed to. Aiden mapped out a timeline. Caleb created a list of companies involved. They were still kids, but smart, fast, and fiercely protective. At one point, Aiden looked up and said, "Mom, I want to help you get your life back." Caleb added, "And maybe take Dad down while we're at it." Evelyn shook her head gently, not to scold them, but because she felt overwhelmed. She couldn't speak, but she placed her hands on both their cheeks, eyes full of love. They understood instantly. Night settled over Manhattan, casting a soft glow across Central Park. The suite buzzed with quiet determination, the sound of typing, the whisper of pages flipping. Evelyn Hart wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was training the next generation to stand beside her, and for the first time, the balance of power was shifting. By the end of the week, the Ritz suite no longer felt like a place of refuge. It felt like a war room. Documents covered the dining table, flowcharts sprawled across the marble countertop. The twins moved with purpose, their young faces sharpened by determination far beyond their years. And Evelyn, though still unable to project her voice, had reclaimed something far more powerful, her ability to think, analyze, and strike. Late one evening, Alexander arrived with a folder tucked beneath his arm, his expression serious but excited. "I have something for all 3 of you," he said, closing the suite door behind him. Aiden and Caleb straightened immediately. Evelyn turned in her chair, curiosity lighting her tired eyes. Alexander set the folder on the table. "There's an investor I want you to meet. Someone who owes me a favor, and someone who might be interested in a new venture," the boys mentioned. The twins exchanged a startled glance. Aiden whispered. The boys mentioned? We didn't even pitch anything. Alexander smiled. Not officially, but I'd been watching you two, your curiosity, your drive. And earlier today, I showed a colleague the outline you had on your laptops. Caleb blinked. The real estate tech concept? Alexander nodded. You're thinking like entrepreneurs. Your father built his success on manipulation, but you two, you're building yours on innovation. Evelyn's breath caught. She hadn't realized how seriously Alexander had been paying attention. He continued. Tomorrow afternoon, you'll meet Leonard Brooks. The name hung in the air like a thunderbolt. Even Evelyn lifted her eyebrows in disbelief. Leonard Brooks was one of the most influential private investors in New York, known for turning obscure startups into multi-million-dollar power players. Caleb choked out. Those Brooks, as in Brooks Holdings, the guy with the Park Avenue office? Alexander smirked. The same. He thinks your idea has legs, and he wants to hear it from you directly. The boys stared at him, stunned into silence. Evelyn touched her throat, wanting so badly to express her gratitude. Instead, she reached for Alexander's hand, squeezing it with all the emotion her voice couldn't carry. He squeezed back gently. Evie, this is just the beginning. The next day, the four of them met in a private lounge in Midtown overlooking the city skyline. Leonard Brooks arrived with 2 assistants, his presence filling the room instantly. He studied Aiden and Caleb with a mixture of curiosity and mild amusement, as if unsure whether teenagers could possibly interest him. Alexander speaks highly of you, Leonard said, folding his hands. Let's hear what you've got. Aiden opened the pitch while Caleb controlled the visuals. They explained their idea, a web-based platform that tracked structural inefficiencies in aging residential buildings using public records, owner histories, and rent data to identify suspicious patterns in maintenance budgets. Leonard leaned back. You're talking about exposing landlords? Caleb nodded. Bad ones, yes. Ones who cut corners, hide repairs, fake invoices. People like he stopped himself. They weren't ready to reveal Cole's name. Leonard looked impressed in spite of himself. And what makes you two think you can pull this off? Aiden answered calmly. Because we lived through what corruption looks like and we want to build something that helps people, like our mom. People who lose everything because someone with money can hide the truth. Leonard fell quiet, tapping his pen. Evelyn watched her sons with tears threatening to spill. They weren't just defending her, they were creating something bigger, something meaningful. Finally, Leonard said, I'll fund the prototype, but I want bi-weekly updates. And if this works, we'll talk equity. Caleb's jaw dropped. Aiden's eyes widened. Evelyn covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Alexander placed a hand on her back. I told you, they're extraordinary. As they shook hands with Leonard Brooks, Aiden whispered, Mom, this is our chance. Caleb added softly, and it's the one Dad never saw coming. For the first time, Evelyn felt the shift. Power was moving. Momentum was building. Cole Whitford had no idea how close his downfall truly was. Cole Whitford always believed he was untouchable. He walked through Midtown that morning with the swagger of a man who owned half the skyline. His phone buzzed non-stop emails from investors, notifications from financial news outlets praising his vision, and messages from Harper asking what he wanted for dinner. It should have been a perfect day. It wasn't. Halfway to his office, his assistant called, panic slicing through her usually calm voice. Mr. Whitford, you need to get here now. There's an issue. Cole rolled his eyes. Handle it. That's literally what I pay you for. It's not something I can handle, she whispered. It's the auditors. They're in the conference room. His step faltered. Why didn't anyone tell me? He snapped. We didn't know either. They said it was an anonymous tip. A cold shiver crept through Cole's spine. Anonymous tip. The timing was too perfect, but he forced his confidence back into place. Fine, I'll deal with it. When he entered Whitford Development's glass tower, employees avoided eye contact, whispered, shifted awkwardly in their seats. Cole walked past them, jaw locked, pretending their unease meant nothing. Inside the conference room, 3 auditors sat with folders stacked like bricks. One slid a document toward him. Mr. Whitford, we're here regarding discrepancies in your 2017 to 2022 vendor payments. Cole barely glanced at it. I run a large company. Discrepancies happen. My accountant will sort it out. The auditor didn't blink. Your accountant revealed he never authorized these transactions. Cole's stomach tightened. And the signatures, another auditor added. belonged to someone else entirely. Cole picked up the papers and nearly froze. The forged signature, Evelyn Hart. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. He forced a scoff. My ex-wife couldn't handle a household budget, let alone corporate funds. She probably signed something by accident. That's not possible, the auditor replied. These signatures were digitally layered, copy-pasted, done by someone with access to internal systems. Cole felt the ground shift beneath him. Mr. Whitford, the lead auditor said, we'll need full access to your company's financials. Immediately. Before he could respond, Damon Cross stormed into the room. We need to talk. Now. Cole followed him outside, fury exploding. What the hell is going on? Damon shoved a tablet into his hands. This is what's going on. Financial news headlines flashed on the screen. Whitford development under investigation. Anonymous whistleblower exposes suspicious payments. Investors demand full transparency. Cole's throat tightened. Who would leak? But he froze before finishing the question. One name struck him like a physical blow. Pierce Equity. Under one headline, sources connected to Pierce Equity confirm reviewing documents related to Whitford Development's financial inconsistencies. Alexander Pierce. Cole's blood boiled. That man had always infuriated him. Handsome, wealthy, composed, the kind of man Evelyn once cared about. The kind of man Cole hated without ever admitting why. He clenched his jaw so hard it hurt. He thinks he can take me down? Over my dead. Damon cut him off. Focus. Investors are pulling out. Shares dropped 10% this morning alone. We're hemorrhaging. Cole didn't hear anything else. His mind roared with one thought. Evelyn. Did she know? Was she involved? Was this revenge? His anger built like a storm. Blinding. Reckless. He lifted his phone and called Harper. We're leaving town tonight, he barked. I need to get ahead of this. Harper hesitated. Cole, is it really that bad? It's worse. He hung up before she could ask more. As he stepped into the elevator, he caught his reflection in the mirrored walls. For the first time in his life, Cole Whitford did not see a winner. He saw a man being hunted, and he had no idea who was closing in faster. Alexander Pierce or the woman he once threw into the snow like she didn't matter. Back at the Ritz, the atmosphere had shifted. The suite no longer felt like a temporary shelter. It felt like the headquarters of a movement. Evelyn sat near the window, wrapped in a soft blanket, her throat still sore, but her eyes sharper than they had been in years. She watched her son's work with a growing mixture of pride and awe. Aiden sat at the table with 3 monitors open, analyzing public data on Whitford development projects. Caleb sprawled on the couch with his laptop, headphones on, reviewing building code violations flagged over the past 5 years. Their screens looked like something out of a tech startup. Heat maps, charts, flagged anomalies, timelines. These were still boys, but they were no longer helpless. Alexander arrived at noon carrying takeout containers from a quiet upscale cafe on 5th Avenue. The twins barely looked up, too focused on their work. Should I be concerned? He said lightly, or impressed. Caleb slid off his headphones. Both. Aiden pointed at the screen. Look at this. Dad bought a low-value property in 2019, then somehow tripled the expense ledger in 6 months. The numbers don't make sense unless Caleb finished, unless he funneled money into shell companies. Alexander moved closer. And those shells? Are they the same ones your mom's name was tied to? Aiden clicked through. 2 of them match. Exactly. Evelyn inhaled sharply, a mix of dread and vindication knotting in her chest. Caleb leaned forward. He used her identity like a shield. So, if anybody found out, she'd take the fall. Alexander's expression darkened. Classic Cole. Using the person who loved him most as his cover. Evelyn lowered her gaze, pain swelling in her throat. Not physical this time, but emotional. She had stood by Cole for years, trusted him, believed him, supported him, and he had weaponized her loyalty. Caleb glanced at her and softened. Mom, we're not letting him get away with it. Aiden nodded. This time, we fight together. Something settled inside Evelyn, then something steady and fierce. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising, and her sons were rising with her. Alexander pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. There's something you need to see. He opened it to reveal a portfolio. An investment group from Boston reached out. They're considering buying a cluster of buildings in Manhattan, including one owned by Whitford Development, the same building where he kicked you out. Aiden's eyes widened. Wait, that building? Caleb clenched his fists. He'd snorts lose millions. Alexander nodded. Exactly. And this group is unsure whether to proceed because of the rumors surrounding Cole's finances. They asked for an independent risk assessment. I suggested quietly that your family could prepare one. Evelyn blinked in surprise. You want us to help with that? Aiden asked. I want you to lead it, Alexander said. The three of you know his methods better than anyone. You can expose the structural flaws, the falsified repairs, the fake invoices. Caleb's voice sharpened. If we do this right, they'll pull out and Dad's company will collapse faster, Alexander finished. Evelyn felt her heart ache, not for Cole, but for the version of herself who once believed he'd protect her. That woman was gone, and the new one had work to do. Aiden turned to his mother. Mom, we can take down his whole operation, but only if you're okay with it, Caleb added softly. We won't move unless you say yes. Evelyn reached out, placing a hand on each of their cheeks. Her voice was a soft whisper, fragile but present. Yes. That one quiet word carried more power than the boys had ever heard from her. Alexander nodded with approval. Then it settled. The twins returned to their laptops with renewed fire. For the first time, the Whitford empire wasn't being attacked from the outside. It was being dismantled from within by the very family Cole tried to destroy. The day of the auction arrived with the kind of sharp winter air that made even Manhattan feel brittle. Evelyn stood outside the Midtown Investment Hall, wrapped in a long black coat Alexander had insisted she take. She still felt the familiar ache in her throat whenever she swallowed, but her posture was straighter now, stronger. Her sons stood on either side of her, each carrying a laptop bag like miniature executives preparing for battle. Alexander joined them with a confident stride. Ready? He asked quietly. Aiden answered first. We've been ready for weeks. Caleb nodded. Let's finish this. Inside, the auction hall buzzed with tension. Investors, developers, and corporate representatives filled the space, their designer coats draped over chairs, their expensive watches glinting under the recessed lighting. On stage, a massive digital board displayed the properties up for sale. Among them, highlighted in bold white letters, West End Residence Tower, Lot 14, owned by Whitford Development. Evelyn stared at the name. She remembered the marble floors, the smell of cold luxury, the long hallway where Cole had once kissed her goodnight before turning into someone unrecognizable. Her heart clenched, but not from pain, from resolve. The twins pulled out their laptops. Aiden whispered, When Lot 14 comes up, we'll monitor the bids. Everything is ready, Caleb added. If Cole tries anything illegal, we'll see it. Alexander leaned close to Evelyn. Remember, today isn't about revenge. Today is about reclaiming what was taken. She nodded softly. Her voice still couldn't carry far, but her eyes said everything. Across the room, Cole arrived with Harper clinging to his arm. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, but the facade of control was cracking. His eyes darted around the room, suspicious, restless. The investigation was already draining him. Investors had begun to question him. Auditors were demanding files, and now he was forced to sell the very building he once bragged he'd passed down to his sons. Harper whispered something, attempting to soothe his ego, but Cole shoved her hand away. He looked older, angrier, haunted. His gaze swept the crowd and landed on Evelyn. He froze. Evelyn didn't look away. Neither did the twins. Aiden's jaw tightened. Caleb's eyes burned with something raw and protective. Cole stepped forward. Evelyn? What the hell are you? Alexander appeared at her side, calm and composed. Cole's face drained of color. You? Cole hissed. This is your doing. Alexander didn't react. Don't flatter yourself. You torched your own empire. Before Cole could spit back, the auctioneer's voice boomed across the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin with the next set of properties. Lot 14, West End Residence Tower. A hush fell. Cole rushed toward the front, signaling his attorney. We're bidding. I don't care what it takes. Harper grabbed his wrist. Cole, we don't have the liquidity. Shut up, he snapped. The bidding started at a price far lower than Cole expected. Investors raised their paddles. Numbers climbed. Cole pushed higher with reckless desperation, each bid slicing deeper into whatever money he still had. Aiden tracked everything in real time. He's overextending. He can't cover these bids. He's bluffing with money he doesn't actually have. Caleb typed furiously. Exactly what we hoped. But then, suddenly, the room quieted. The bidding paused at a number so high even seasoned developers hesitated. The auctioneer looked around. Any further bids? Going once? A paddle lifted. Evelyn gasped softly. It was Alexander. Cole spun around. You son of going twice? Another paddle lifted, but this time it wasn't Alexander's. It was Aiden's. He stood tall, shoulders squared. Next to him, Caleb lifted his own paddle matching, steady, unwavering. Whispers exploded around the room. Who are those kids? Why do they have a bidding number? Wait, those are the Whitford boys. Cole stumbled backward, stunned, silent. The auctioneer lifted an eyebrow. Bidder name? Aiden answered clearly. Hart Brothers Holdings. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. And Cole, for the first time in his life, he had no words. The auction hall erupted into a wave of stunned murmurs. Phones were lifted, whispers rushed, and heads craned toward the two teenagers who had just derailed an entire empire with a single lifted paddle. Aiden and Caleb Hart didn't flinch. They stood grounded, steady, almost eerily calm for boys there who belonged in that room, because in that moment, they did. Cole Whitford, however, looked like a man watching his own obituary being written. What the hell do you think you're doing? He barked, voice echoing off the polished walls. Aiden didn't answer him. He focused on the auctioneer, who cleared his throat. We have a new high bid from Hart Brothers Holdings. Do we have any competing bids? Silence. Even the seasoned developers hesitated. No one wanted to go up against Pierce Equity's resources or the momentum surging behind those two boys. The entire mood shifted. It felt inevitable, like history rewriting itself right in front of them. Cole stepped closer, desperation seeping into every movement. You can't do this. You're minors. You can't legally make this purchase. Caleb lifted his chin. We're not making it alone. As if on cue, Alexander stepped forward, hands in his pockets, perfectly composed. Hart Brothers Holdings is structured under a trust. They have full legal authority to bid, and I'm serving as managing partner. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cole whipped toward Evelyn, who had remained quiet the entire time. She stood behind her sons, soft breath trembling, but her posture tall, dignified. Her dark coat framed her like armor. You put them up to this? Cole spat. Evelyn didn't speak. She couldn't. But she held his gaze with a calm fierceness he'd never seen before. Her silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was power. Going once, the auctioneer announced. Cole slammed his bid paddle onto the table. I'm not letting a pair of children take what's mine. But his lawyer tugged at his sleeve and whispered urgently, Cole, stop. You can't cover the last bid. If you push any higher, you'll trigger an immediate liquidity check and you'll fail. Cole froze up. His pulse pounded in his ears, going twice. He looked around hoping someone, anyone would jump in, save him, rescue his sinking reputation. No one moved. Not an investor, not a partner, not even Harper. She didn't touch him, didn't whisper, didn't encourage. She just watched. And that terrified him more than anything. Sold, the auctioneer declared, striking the gavel. West End Residence Tower is officially awarded to Hart Brothers Holdings. Applause broke out, genuine, almost relieved applause. It wasn't for the real estate. It wasn't even for the deal. It was for justice. Aiden released a slow breath. Caleb exhaled shakily. Evelyn covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Alexander rested a steady hand on her back. The gesture subtle but grounding. Cole staggered backward. This is impossible, he muttered. You can't just come in, and Caleb stepped forward. You kicked us out of that building. Aiden joined him. We just bought it. The room erupted again. Cole's face twisted with disbelief. You think this makes you better than me? No, Aiden said quietly. It makes us free from you. That hit harder than any public defeat. Cole looked around wildly, searching for someone to blame, someone to punish. His empire was crumbling, his finances under investigation, his reputation sinking, and now the building he once ruled had slipped into the hands of the very people he tried to break. Harper finally stepped forward, placing a perfectly rehearsed smile on her lips. Cole, sweetheart, let's go. But her tone wasn't supportive. It was patronizing, detached, almost pleased. He stared at her, realizing too late that betrayal works both ways. Behind him, Aiden and Caleb helped Evelyn step forward. She looked fragile in body, but unshakable in presence. For the first time in years, she faced Cole without fear, and for the first time in his life, Cole Whitford understood what it felt like to be powerless. The moment the gavel dropped, the auction hall began to empty, but the electricity in the air remained. Journalists whispered into their phones, investors exchanged stunned glances, and staff members hurried to process the paperwork. But Evelyn barely noticed any of it. Her sons flanked her on both sides as if guarding a queen. Alexander remained close, silently steady, a quiet force she leaned on without leaning visibly. When they stepped outside, the icy air hit them, but it wasn't the same cold that had swallowed them weeks before. This cold carried promise. Aiden held the building's acquisition documents in his gloved hands. Caleb tucked their bidder's badge into his coat pocket like a trophy. Evelyn looked up at the New York skyline, her breath trembling from emotion, not weakness. "You did it," Alexander said softly behind her. She turned to him, her voice still thin, but present. "They did it." Each word strained her throat, but warmed her chest. She touched Aiden's cheek, then Caleb's. Her sons had accomplished something even grown men rarely achieved, but the victory wasn't complete, not yet. They still had to walk back through the doors of the building Cole once used to destroy her, and this time, she wouldn't be dragged out in the snow. She would walk in as the owner. Hours later, they returned to West End Residence Tower. Snow lined the sidewalks, melting in slow patches under street lamps. The doorman, Frank, the same man who once apologized helplessly as she was thrown out, straightened the moment he saw them. "Miss Hart," he said, voice shaky with emotion. "I heard what happened at the auction. Is it true?" Aiden stepped forward proudly. "We bought the building." Frank's eyes widened. "You what?" Caleb grinned. "Mom owns it now. Well, us, too." Frank looked at Evelyn, disbelief turning into admiration. He removed his cap in respect. "Welcome home, Miss Hart." Evelyn inhaled sharply as the lobby doors opened. Everything looked the same, the marble floors, the golden lighting, but it no longer felt like a place of humiliation. Now it felt like justice carved into stone. Residents peeked from the hallways, whispering. Some smiled warmly, others gasped in shock. Many had seen the viral video of her eviction, and now they were witnessing something almost cinematic, her return. The elevator opened, and the four of them stepped in. The doors slid shut, trapping the moment in silence. Then the elevator dinged, and Cole stood there, blocking their exit. His suit was wrinkled, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot. He looked nothing like the polished mogul he pretended to be. The investigation had worn him down. The auction had broken him further. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, voice cracked with rage. Aiden stepped out first. "Checking on our building." Cole's face twisted. "You're what?" Caleb added. "We're the new owners. Didn't you hear?" Cole turned ghost white. Evelyn stepped forward slowly. This time she didn't tremble. Her voice wasn't strong, but it was clear. "Leave." Cole blinked hard, as though he couldn't process the word. "Eve, wait. We can fix this. We can talk. I'll make things right." Alexander stepped beside her, calm but protective. She said, "Leave." Cole looked between them, panic rising. "You can't do this to me. I'm your husband." Evelyn shook her head gently. "You stopped being that the night you left me in the snow." Residents gathered behind Cole, watching. Whispers turned into murmurs. The humiliation he'd once inflicted was now mirrored back onto him tenfold. Cole's voice cracked. "Evie, please." But Evelyn turned away, walking into the building he no longer controlled. Her sons followed, and Cole Whitford, once powerful, once feared, stood alone in the hallway, realizing too late that the woman he tried to break had risen higher than he ever imagined. The next morning, the sky over Manhattan glowed a pale winter blue as Evelyn Hart prepared to face the moment she had avoided for years, a conversation she never once imagined she'd have the strength to confront. The West End Residence Tower lobby hummed quietly, residents lingering with curiosity as Evelyn stepped inside with Aiden, Caleb, and Alexander by her side. Word had spread quickly. The woman once thrown out in the freezing snow had returned as the co-owner. And now the man who humiliated her was about to face the consequences. Cole Whitford waited on the mezzanine level, his posture stiff, hands shaking as he gripped the railing. His clothes looked slept in, his tie crooked, eyes swollen with sleeplessness. He had requested, begged, really, for a meeting. The boys insisted she didn't owe him anything. But Evelyn agreed, not for him, for herself. She walked up the marble stairs slowly, every step echoing. Her throat felt tight, but not from fear, from control. She no longer trembled in his presence. Cole took a shaky breath. "Evie, thank you for coming." Evelyn met his eyes with a calm he didn't recognize. "Speak," she whispered, her voice raspy but steady. He swallowed hard. "I made mistakes," he began, voice cracking. "I was under pressure. I didn't think clearly." His hands fumbled. Everything got complicated, and Harper, she lied to me, manipulated me. I didn't know what I was doing when I won, when I threw you out. I was scared. I didn't know how to fix things. Aiden scoffed under his breath. Caleb glared at him. Cole continued, desperate. "I know I hurt you. All of you. Just give me a chance. Let me make things right. I'll step back. I'll give you space." Evelyn lifted a hand. Silence. She stepped closer, looking straight into the eyes of the man she once trusted with her life. "When I needed you," she whispered, "you left me on the sidewalk, unable to speak, unable to breathe. You watched your sons cry. You watched me fall." Her voice trembled with emotion but never broke. "You didn't make a mistake, Cole. You made a choice." He flinched. Alexander stood in the background, jaw tight but silent, a guardian, not an intruder. Cole reached out. "Evie, please. I don't want to lose you." Evelyn stepped backward, shaking her head slowly. "You already did." He broke then, knees buckling as he tried to catch himself. "Evie, I love you. I know I didn't show it, but I do. I need you. I need our family back." Caleb stepped forward sharply. "You don't get to say that," Aiden added. "You lost us the moment you traded us for your pride." Cole's face crumpled. He sank into a nearby chair, rubbing his face with shaking hands. "I've lost everything. Investors, Harper, my reputation, my company. It's collapsing." He looked up with hollow eyes. "I have nothing left." Evelyn inhaled deeply. This was the man she once built a life with, the father of her children. The man she once believed would protect her as fiercely as she protected him. But those illusions were dead. She stepped toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Cole, I don't want to punish you. I don't want revenge. I want peace." His eyes lit with hope, but she continued. "And peace," she said quietly, "means you won't be a part of my life anymore." The hope died instantly. Cole stared at her, broken. "Evie, please." Evelyn placed a hand on the railing, drawing strength from the cold metal. "From this day forward, we live separate lives. I will co-parent through legal terms only. No more surprises, no more fear, no more power over me." Aiden and Caleb stepped beside her, her pillars. Alexander placed a steady hand on her back, grounding her. Cole's voice cracked. "Evie, don't do this." She didn't respond. She simply turned away. Her sons followed, walking down the stairs with her. Cole remained frozen, staring at the woman he believed would never leave him, but she already had. And this time, she wasn't looking back. The weeks after Evelyn's final confrontation with Cole marked the beginning of a new life, one she hadn't dared imagine during those long, quiet nights recovering in the Ritz suite. Manhattan felt different now. The city lights no longer mocked her pain. They welcomed her back, shimmering with opportunity rather than judgment. Pierce Equity opened its doors to her not as a charity gesture, but as a strategic decision. Alexander walked her through the sleek, glass-walled office overlooking Park Avenue, the hum of analysts and traders moving like a quiet symphony around them. "You'll have full control over the forensic accounting division," he explained. "You already exposed a pattern in Whitford Development's fraud schemes. I want you to lead a team that investigates other corporations hiding behind the same tricks." Evelyn hesitated. Her voice was still fragile, inconsistent, but her eyes carried certainty. "I can do that," she whispered. "You already have," Alexander said, smiling softly. Her office was modern, warm, and understated. A large window overlooked the city skyline. A vase with white orchids sat on her desk, a gift Alexander didn't mention, but she recognized immediately. Aiden and Caleb joined her after school, settling into the chairs opposite her desk like two junior partners. They worked on their startup, refining the real estate analysis platform Leonard Brooks had funded. They weren't doing it for revenge anymore. They were doing it for impact. One afternoon, Aiden looked up from his laptop. "Mom, Mr. Brooks wants to meet again. He said investors are lining up." Caleb added excitedly, "And he said we need a brand name. Something official." Evelyn smiled at them, truly smiled. Not the tight, silent smile she had been forced to wear before. "What about Hard Insights?" Aiden suggested. Caleb shook his head. "Too boring." Alexander knocked lightly on the open door. "How about Heart Vision?" he offered. "Future-focused, tied to your name, easy to brand." The twins exchanged a look. Aiden grinned. "That's actually really good." Caleb nodded. "We love it." Evelyn felt warmth rush through her. Her family name, once tied to Cole's control, was being redefined by her son's brilliance. Later that evening, they moved into a new apartment in Brooklyn Heights. The space was smaller than their old life with Cole, but it was theirs. Cozy, peaceful, a fresh start. The boys chose matching desks by the window. Evelyn placed framed photos of them along the shelves, pictures she hadn't been allowed to display in Cole's ultra-modern, heartless penthouse. Alexander stopped by to help assemble furniture, rolling up his sleeves as he worked beside the twins. He didn't act like a billionaire. He acted like someone who cared, someone steady, someone who understood the weight of rebuilding. At one point, Caleb nudged Aiden and whispered, "He likes her, doesn't he?" Aiden smirked. "Duh." Evelyn overheard them and blushed, pretending she didn't. But her heart felt lighter, knowing she wasn't navigating this new world alone. Meanwhile, news of Cole's downfall spread quickly. Whitford Development bled investors by the day. Auditors found more forged documents. Harper quietly disappeared from his life, taking with her whatever she could salvage. Cole filed emergency appeals, tried to freeze the sale of West End Tower, but the courts dismissed him. He was spiraling, and everyone in the industry knew it. Evelyn didn't celebrate his pain, but she didn't mourn it, either. She was too busy building something new. One evening, as she looked at her sons working on Heart Vision, she realized something profound. Cole had destroyed her old world, but in doing so, he had unintentionally cleared the path for a better one. This wasn't survival anymore. It was rebirth. And the empire forming around her wasn't built on fear, manipulation, or power plays. It was built on truth, on family, on resilience, and it was only the beginning. Winter thawed slowly over New York, melting into a softer, gentler spring. Evelyn could feel the shift, not just in the weather, but in her life. The chaos, the fear, the humiliation, all of it had begun to fade, replaced by small pieces of peace she had never known she needed. Her mornings now started with quiet sunlight streaming through the Brooklyn Heights apartment, the smell of fresh coffee filling the kitchen. Sometimes the boys brewed it for her before school. Sometimes Alexander stopped by early carrying 2 tall Starbucks cups, her tea, his black coffee. "You look stronger every day," he would say, handing her the cup. And she did. Her voice was returning, slowly but steadily. Speech therapy paid off. She could now hold short conversations without pain, though her words still felt fragile. But every improvement felt like reclaiming a part of herself Cole had tried to silence. One afternoon, Evelyn walked to the local bookstore, a cozy little spot near the promenade. The owner recognized her from before everything fell apart. "Evelyn, it's been a long time," he said warmly. She smiled, a gentle whisper of sound escaping. "I'm back." He looked at her with unexpected emotion. "Good. You deserve to be." She wandered the aisles, fingertips brushing the spines of books she once loved but had abandoned during the darkest months. She picked up a copy of Atomic Habits, another of the 48 Laws of Power, and a memoir about surviving betrayal. She wasn't searching for answers, just reminders that reinvention was possible. When she returned home, she found Aiden and Caleb on the living room floor surrounded by sketchpads and notes. "What's all this?" she asked softly. Caleb looked up, excited. "We're designing the Heart Vision office," Aiden added. "We want a space that feels like Mom, calm, warm, organized, strong." Evelyn's throat tightened. She sat beside them, overwhelmed by the love she saw in their efforts. Her sons weren't just building a company, they were building a tribute to survival. Later that week, she attended her first Pierce Equity meeting. Her entrance turned heads, not because of glamour, but because of presence. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, a soft voice but steady posture. Colleagues greeted her with respect, acknowledging the woman who had uncovered one of the most expensive fraud schemes in Manhattan. During a break, a female analyst approached her quietly. "Miss Hart, I watched the video, the one of your eviction. I wanted to say you're the reason I finally stood up to someone in my life." Evelyn blinked back tears. "Thank you," she whispered. The analyst nodded and walked away, leaving Evelyn with a sense of impact she had never expected to have. But healing wasn't just professional. That evening, she and Alexander walked along the Brooklyn Heights promenade, the Manhattan skyline glowing like a river of gold across the water. He didn't touch her, didn't push, didn't expect. He simply walked beside her, the silence comfortable, the space between them warm. "You've changed," he said quietly. "So have you," she replied. He smiled. "I just finally caught up to myself. You became who you were always meant to be." She looked at him, breath catching not from weakness, but from something new, something gentle, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience since her marriage had crumbled. "Alex," she said softly, "why did you come back?" He paused, hands in his coat pockets. "Because I never stopped caring, and because the woman I saw in that snow, she wasn't the end of your story. She was the start of your rise." Evelyn didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked at the skyline, the buildings, the lights, the city that had once felt like her enemy. Now it felt like possibility. Behind her, Aiden and Caleb waited at home. Ahead of her, Heart Vision was coming to life. Beside her, someone steady walked patiently. Healing wasn't a destination, it was this moment, this breath, this quiet victory, and she was finally ready for what came next. Spring settled fully over New York by the time Cole Whitford asked to see his sons. The request arrived through his attorney, not through Cole himself, a sign of how far he had fallen. His company was now weeks away from bankruptcy. Investors had abandoned him, and the pending fraud investigation grew sharper by the day. Harper was long gone, leaving him without a single ally. Still, Aiden and Caleb hesitated. "Do we even want to see him?" Aiden asked as they sat in the living room. Caleb folded his arms. "He didn't care about us when Mom needed him. Why should we care now?" Evelyn listened quietly. Her voice had grown stronger, but she chose her words with care. "Closure," she said softly. "Not for him, for you." The boys exchanged a look. They understood. Not forgiveness, not reunion, closure. So, they agreed. The meeting took place in a small conference room at the attorney's Midtown office, a neutral territory. Evelyn waited outside with Alexander, who stood silently beside her, hands in his coat pockets, ready to step in if anything went wrong. She wanted to be present, but she also wanted her sons to face the moment as young men, not frightened children. Inside the room, Cole looked smaller, not physically, emotionally. His shoulders curved inward, his face pale, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. Papers littered the table in front of him, legal documents, warnings from auditors, notices of frozen accounts. His world had shrunk to a confined box of consequences. When Aiden and Caleb entered, Cole stood up quickly. "Boys," he breathed, voice trembling. "Thank you for coming." Aiden stayed by the door while Caleb sat down, arms crossed protectively. They didn't make it easy for him. Cole swallowed hard. "I know I've lost everything. My company, my home, your respect." His voice cracked. "But losing your mother, hurting her the way I did, that's the one thing I can't forgive myself for." Caleb shot back. "You didn't care when you kicked her into the snow." "I cared," Cole whispered. "But I cared about the wrong things. My image, my deals, Harper." He shook his head, grief washing over him. "I thought power made me strong, but I see now it made me cruel." Aiden's eyes narrowed. "Why now? Why are you saying all this now?" "Because," Cole said, his voice trembling, "I don't want the last memory you have of me to be the man who shoved you behind a security guard and called your mother a burden." Silence filled the room. Thick, uncomfortable, heavy. Caleb leaned forward. "What do you want from us?" Cole met his gaze. "Nothing," he said honestly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to ever see me again. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly. Aiden looked at his father. Really looked. The man in front of him wasn't the towering figure who once dictated their every move. He was broken, empty, and finally aware of what he had destroyed. Caleb exhaled slowly. We're not here to make you feel better. Cole nodded. I know. Aiden added quietly. But we're not here to punish you either. For a moment, Cole looked almost relieved. Caleb continued. We're here so we can move on. Mom isn't looking back, neither are we. Aiden stood first. Caleb followed. Cole stayed seated, staring at the table because looking at them hurt too much. Just before leaving, Aiden stopped. Dad, he said softly. I hope you figure yourself out, Caleb added, and I hope you stop blaming everyone else. Then they walked out. When they stepped into the hallway, Evelyn wrapped her arms around them. They didn't cry, but their bodies sagged in release, like had just set down something they'd carried for too long. Alexander placed a steady hand on Evelyn's shoulder. They handled that with strength, he murmured. She nodded, feeling a weight lift from her chest. Closure wasn't forgiveness. Closure was freedom, and her family finally had it. Spring warmed into early summer by the time West End Residence Tower reopened under new ownership. The gleaming glass doors, once symbols of humiliation and loss, now reflected a very different story, one of triumph, rebirth, and poetic justice. The event was widely publicized. Whispers of the woman who bought the building she was kicked out of had circulated through Manhattan for weeks. Journalists gathered outside, cameras poised, microphones ready. Inside the renovated lobby, the atmosphere felt almost ceremonial. Fresh white marble, soft golden lighting, subtle floral arrangements, and a polished brass plaque that read, Heart Tower, reimagined, restored, reborn. Evelyn stood near the entrance, wearing an elegant cream-colored dress that draped gracefully across her frame. Her voice wasn't perfect yet, but it was strong enough to greet staff and guests. Aiden and Caleb stood beside her in matching navy blazers, each looking older, sharper young men shaped by hardship but defined by resilience. You nervous? Aiden whispered. She smiled softly. A little. Caleb nudged her shoulder. You don't need to be. This is your moment. Alexander arrived then, wearing a charcoal suit that seemed tailored for this exact evening. He paused when he saw her, admiration softening his features. You look incredible, Evie. Thank you, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Reporters swarmed instantly. Miss Hart, how does it feel to stand here today? Is it true your sons led the acquisition? What message do you want this reopening to send? Evelyn inhaled, grounding herself. It feels like coming home, she replied carefully. And yes, my sons played a major role. This isn't about money. It's about rebuilding what was broken and showing that strength can come from the most unexpected places. A ripple of respect moved through the crowd. They moved toward the ribbon-cutting area, where a sleek white ribbon stretched across the newly polished foyer. The twins handed their mother a pair of ceremonial gold scissors, but before she could cut it, a sudden commotion stirred near the entrance. Guests glanced over their shoulders. A few gasps traveled through the crowd. Cole Whitford had arrived. He looked like a ghost of himself. Thinner, tired, hollow. His once expensive coat hung loosely on his shoulders, and his eyes carried the weight of weeks of legal battles and public disgrace. No cameras turned toward him. He no longer commanded attention. He approached silently, hands trembling slightly. Alexander instinctively stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Evelyn raised a gentle hand. She wanted no scene, no drama today. Cole stopped several feet away, gaze fixed on the plaque bearing her family's name. His voice was faint. You did this. Evelyn nodded. We did. He looked at her sons next. Shame flickered across his face. You two grew up. Aiden straightened. We had to, Caleb added. Because you didn't. Cole swallowed hard. I'm not here to fight. I just needed to see it, to see what I lost. Evelyn's eyes softened, not with pity, but closure. Then look, and understand that none of this came from hate. It came from rebuilding. Cole's eyes glistened. He nodded once, stepped back, and disappeared into the crowd unnoticed, unimportant, a shadow fading from a story no longer his. The moment he left, Evelyn turned back to the ribbon. Alexander whispered, This is your future, Evie. She lifted the scissors, hands steady. Aiden and Caleb placed their hands over hers. Together, They cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Journalists scrambled to capture the moment. Staff cheered quietly, and Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her chest. Light, full, freeing. She had walked into this building once as a wife abandoned. Tonight, she walked in as a woman reborn, and the world finally saw her for who she had always been. Night settled over Manhattan with a calm glow, the kind that softened the edges of the skyline and reflected gently off the newly restored glass of Hart Tower. Inside the building, the celebration had slowly wound down. Guests drifted out with warm smiles. Reporters packed their equipment, and the lobby lights dimmed to a soft golden hue. What remained was a comfortable quiet, the kind that made every victory feel even more real. Evelyn stood alone for a moment at the base of the grand staircase, staring at the plaque bearing her family's name. Her fingers lightly traced the engraved letters. For so long, she had felt erased from her own life. Tonight, she was carved into the city itself. Aiden and Caleb approached from behind. "Mom," Aiden said gently. "Everyone's waiting for your final speech upstairs." Caleb grinned. "You get to close the night." Evelyn smiled, warmed by their pride. "Let's go," she whispered. They ascended the staircase together, three figures who had weathered storms that would have broken many adults. At the top, a terrace door opened to reveal the rooftop garden, newly renovated, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. String lights hung above, swaying slightly in the breeze. A small crowd remained, investors, staff, neighbors, and people who had followed the story and come simply to witness her new beginning. Alexander stood near the railing, speaking quietly with the COO of Pierce Equity. When he saw Evelyn step out, he excused himself immediately, eyes never leaving her. "You ready?" he asked. She nodded. "More than I ever thought I could be." He led her to the small podium. Aiden squeezed her hand. Caleb kissed her cheek. Then they stepped back, letting their mother stand before the world. Evelyn took a breath. For a moment, her throat tightened, but not from fear, from emotion, from memory, from the magnitude of what this moment meant. "My voice," she began softly, "was taken from me for a long time. But even when I couldn't speak, I learned something important." She paused, steadying the tremor in her breath. "Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, it's where strength grows quietly." The crowd leaned in. "I stand here tonight not because I never fell," she continued, "but because I learned how to rise." Her sons watched her with awe. Alexander stood with a steady, quiet pride. "I was thrown out of this building once," she said, her voice gaining power. "Tonight, I walked back in with my sons as its owners. But money, buildings, and titles aren't what truly matter." Her gaze softened. "What matters is the people who stand by you, the ones who believe in you when you can't speak, the ones who lift you when you can't stand." Her eyes drifted to Aiden and Caleb. "My sons are my strength, my courage, my future." Then her gaze met Alexander's steady, warm, open, "And sometimes," she said, "life gives you a second chance at something you thought you'd lost forever." Alexander stepped closer, unable to hide the emotion in his eyes. The crowd withstood the sweet tension, knowing they were witnessing a moment built from years of pain and rediscovery. Evelyn continued, "This building represents survival, but it also represents healing because nothing is more powerful than a person who refuses to stay broken." The applause rose like a wave echoing across the rooftop and into the night sky. When the applause finally faded, Alexander approached Evelyn slowly. "Evie," he said, his voice gentle, "you did it." She looked at him, the man who returned when she had nothing, who never treated her illness as weakness, and who stood beside her without demanding anything in return. Her voice trembled, but this time it was clear. "We did it." Alexander reached for her hand with quiet certainty. Evelyn did not pull away. Behind them, Aiden leaned toward Caleb. "I told you." Caleb smiled. "Yeah, you were right." Evelyn turned toward the Manhattan skyline with Alexander beside her and her sons standing close. The city that had once felt cold and unforgiving now stretched before her, full of possibility. Cole had tried to take her home, her children, her dignity, and even her voice, but he had failed. Evelyn had reclaimed every part of herself, not through revenge, but through courage, truth, and the refusal to remain powerless. Her healing had not happened all at once. It came quietly, one breath, one word, and one brave decision at a time. She was no longer the frightened woman standing in a lobby with a hospital bracelet around her wrist. She was a mother who had protected her sons, a woman who had exposed the truth, and a survivor who had built a future on her own terms. Alexander gently squeezed her hand. Evelyn looked at her family and smiled. The chapter that began with her being silenced ended with the entire world finally hearing her voice.